Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome to the show, magical ones. I have a juicy episode for you today, but before we dive in, I'm feeling the back to school vibes. Now, when I say that, what I really mean is back to Hogwarts. Now, as we sink into autumn and on the lead up to the most witchy month of the year, it is the perfect time to begin to step into your magic and learn to claim your witch and become the healer that you came here to be. So, if you've been waiting for the right moment, firstly, let me remind you, there isn't one. And secondly, let me invite you to join our Secret Witches Apothecary, our sacred space of self-paced archetypal remedy journeys and sisterhood for you to journey at your own pace and even enjoy gathering live in circle with us if you so desire. My heart is so full to be sharing this. It's becoming a living, breathing space of witches as remedies for each other. And it's gorgeous to see it growing. So if you would like to join us, I am hosting a free taster ceremony on the 18th of September to help you meet your witch, even and especially if you feel all the fear in that. If that is calling to you, head to Eventbrite. It's free. Search meetyourwitch.eventbrite.com and I will see you there. For now, though, let's dive into the show. On the Secret Witch Show today is our guest, Amy Wilding. Amy is a red tent keeper, women's circle facilitator, and author of the beloved Wild and Wise and the forthcoming Period of Change, Welcoming Your Daughter's Period with Care and Confidence, which is launching in March 2026. Through her embodied, earth-honouring rites of passage work, she guides women into deep connection with themselves and each other, especially through the sacred threshold of menstruation and womanhood. Amy has been leading circles, retreats, and initiatory experiences for over a decade, helping women reclaim ancient feminine wisdom in modern ways. In this episode, we explore how menstrual shame has been passed down through generations and how women can begin to unlearn it by returning to the sacredness of their bodies. Amy shares the story of how her own healing began after loss, opening her to the wisdom of her cycle and ultimately leading her to become a guide for others. We speak about the power of the red tent, why sisterhood matters, and how women can move through shame and reclaim the initiation they never received. Amy also offers a deeply resonant introduction to the archetype of the menstrual midwife, a guide for mothers, daughters, and a place within every secret witch ready to reclaim her magic through her womb. Let's dive in. Welcome, Amy. I am so honoured to have you on our show today. I know the lovely Lucy Pierce introduced us. I'm so glad she did because your work feels such an anchor point for so many women, returning to their kind of cyclical selves and reclaiming their ancient feminine wisdom, actually, is the phrase that comes to me. So for our Secret Witch listeners, this is going to be especially potent medicine, is my feeling. And I know that many of us kind of have never received that kind of loving initiation into womanhood, I guess, that you're here and helping to create through your red tent work and all the work that you do. And I know you've got a new book, which you're going to share with us as well, coming soon. So I feel like this conversation is going to be a really juicy one. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. This is it's very timely in my life too, because I am also really doing a lot of my own internal work with embracing the secret witch and the witch wound. And so the coincidence of this timing is really magical. So
I
I'm
love
very happy
that.
to have this conversation with you.
I love that so much. Yeah, I always think this it's always like synchronicity. We're so we so often kind of write those nudges off, don't we? But
Yes,
yeah, it's
exactly,
good stuff.
exactly. I even have a meditation in my book, Wild and Wise, called Serendipity, that is just all about that. Mhm.
Gorgeous. Well, welcome. I'm gonna start off the way that I always usually start off, which is as we were just talking about before we press record. Like I'm a big believer that the whole premise of my healing modality is that women's stories are remedies, really, for other women. I believe that we're kind of remedies for each other. People are remedies, and so through the stories we share, we can kind of serve medicine. So I always like to start off by inviting women to, or men, whoever's here to share, but to share a little bit about your journey, particularly with this topic of like red tents, women's circles, and menstrual rites, and all the magical work that you do. So I'm going to start there and see where we go.
Okay, perfect, great. Yeah, so as we were just kind of chit-chatting before you hit record, one of the things that I share with women in every circle that I have is part of the reason that coming together in sisterhood in a safe and sacred container circle is so powerful is because hearing the stories of other women is the medicine that we need to heal our own lives and our own journeys. And so for people who don't have experience of sharing that intimacy with other people, we might not recognize that it is such an important piece of healing our own journey. And so we might actually downplay the importance of sharing our own story with others because we don't necessarily see directly how much our story has an impact on others, on their healing journey, and on the sisterhood in general, the larger sisterhood in general. So I love that we align on that idea. And so sharing my story, I never know how far back to go. I guess I'll start with I wasn't raised by my mother. She wasn't really in my life in any kind of significant way. So I was raised by my dad, and as we are all part of patriarchal culture, I just kind of internalized those messages without even realizing it. When I was 30 years old, I had a miscarriage of my first pregnancy, which was a very wanted pregnancy. And then I wasn't getting pregnant after that miscarriage. So I picked up the book Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Lexler. And it really just blew me wide open. There was so much information about my body, about my cycle, the wisdom of women's hormones that I had never been exposed to. We'd never had conversations around this. This information was completely new to me. So I felt both completely mystified. I felt like this was just the most magical information ever. But I also felt really angry. I felt a lot of rage about this information that had been, I feel, very, very intentionally, systematically kept from me, from other women. And so that really opened the door for the work that has become the work of my life, which is supporting women in reclaiming the agency and sovereignty around their body choices, around their body wisdom, around their cyclical nature. So I began with supporting women in birth and supporting women in breastfeeding. And from there, it all just kind of unfolded very naturally. And then I read The Red Tent, the book by Anita Diamond, probably when I was pregnant with my second child. And something clicked in me that was so deep. It was just this recognition or this deep remembering of, oh, this is what we need. This is how it's supposed to be. We're not meant to be doing this alone. We're not meant to be doing this in isolation. So from there, friends and I began to gather with the full moon every month. We gathered outside, just sort of reclaim this idea of sisterhood and gathering together in a sacred and intentional way. And that grew into Red Tent Louisville, which became a public offering in a dedicated red tent space, which was really beautiful and special. And around that time, my firstborn, who was born with a uterus, assigned female at birth, but is now my trans son, with getting older. And so I was beginning to realized as we didn't have anything for ourselves as women, we didn't have anything culturally to support our kids as they're growing up, as girls, as future menstruators. So I created Period of Change to support me and my child and my friends and their daughters and children. And it really, I think I envisioned it as being something that I would just do, a few times with our friend group, with our cohort, our community. And that was about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
So Period of Change has grown. Red Tent Louisville has grown. I have worked with, I don't even know, countless women and families in supporting not only cyclical literacy, body sovereignty, menstrual understanding, but just in reclaiming that sense of feminine wild wisdom, reclaiming what is ours by birthright, whether that is looking at goddess archetypes or reclaiming pleasure, reclaiming our cyclical nature. So my work is kind of broad, but the fundamental core of all of my work is reclaiming what is ours that has been lost in patriarchy.
Mm. I love that. There's so much. So I've got like so many notes from where we
There's a lot. There's a lot. But
No, I love it. I love it. This happens every time, and I'm just like, ooh, where do we go? One of the questions that came to mind, and firstly, actually, I just want to honor your story and the beautiful gift that you have given to us through sharing it, and what was really clear that I think is important to name for secret witches who often think like we jump to just being a healer because that's what we're sold. We're sold like you go and train and then you're just
oh,
a
right.
healer.
You do my
And
certification.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it's like what you shared was such a beautiful like journey of embodiment through like as I see it, like we heal ourselves and then we're able to then pass that wisdom down and we reclaim for ourselves and we pass that wisdom down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I really love that about your story first.
Thank
Um
you.
and um, one of the questions that comes to mind, because I think this is something that almost like secret witches and women who kind of feel drawn to this work, they feel drawn to it, but almost then also feel like, well, yeah, but it can't be that important because our society doesn't deem it to be important. So there's that whole like kind of judgment piece that can come in.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious to know before we kind of dive into the deeper stuff, is like why has this been so hidden, like in your kind of view, I guess.
Are you talking about menstrual literacy and
Yeah, just yeah, actually, yeah. Let me name that because we're just not taught about our bodies. Like it
oh
was
my
the part of the
gosh.
story where you said, like you just kind of and almost like opened this door and saw a
Mhm.
whole new world. Like, why is it that we get to this point? And I think this is cultural. It's not just,
Oh, it
it's
is.
not even
Yeah.
just secret witches. It's like all of us. Like we're just not taught to understand our bodies. Like, and
Oh
I'm
no.
curious what your sense is like, as to why that is and
Yeah.
how we can begin to change that.
Well, my very strong feeling based on just cultural observation, but also looking historically at human community is that we aren't taught at all that menstruation needs to be honored and revered, and that in fact, the first rituals that social anthropologists have been aware of are regarding menstruation. So we used to track time, we used to track celebrations, and the turning of time through tracking menstruation and its connection with the lunar rhythm as well. So, from the very first human cultures, menstruation was a huge part of our understanding of our connection with magic, with the divine, with the creation of life, even if we didn't have language for it at that time. But in fact, the root of the word ritual is based on um, menstruation. So when we look back in time, this is one of the core fundamental understandings of humans from the very beginning. And for millennia, we had rites of passage and special celebrations and ceremonies, and just a way of living and a way of being that honored menstruation, honored females' bodies, possibility for creating new life. And it really wasn't until the um, the surge of monotheistic patriarchal religion that narrative really changed, to where the stories that were told by men became that women were unclean, that bleeding was a curse. So these stories were perpetuated, and then eventually they grew to where basically subverted the stories that had been told for millennia. So now women were were taught that there was something wrong with our bodies, that we were shameful, that it was embarrassing, that this was a curse because of wrongdoing. And as this story was told over and over and enacted in culture over and over, the disconnect got wider and wider from our original story, our original stance of revering our bodies and honoring our bodies as sacred and magical, to this feeling that we had something to hide, that there was something really wrong, that menstruation is a sign of our wrongdoing. And so, as mother passes on this information to daughter without questioning the origin of the story, that's how shame gets passed from generation to generation, because there's really no examining of like, well, what does this actually mean? Where did this come from? And why are we telling this story? Why are we even believing this story? But the purpose of the story is to control women. It is to keep us separated from our own power. So if we don't understand our bodies, if we don't understand how our bodies work, why they do what they do, if we don't have the names for our body parts, the understanding, the intrinsic understanding of our cyclical nature, it's much easier for others to control us and to remove our agency and our ability to make choices for ourselves, the ability to advocate for ourselves. Because if we're disconnected from that knowledge, we don't necessarily even have the language to advocate for ourselves and make decisions for ourselves. So, from my perspective, it is absolutely intentional. And what's really amazing is that this generation that we're living in now, so I'm a Gen X mom, and the generations that are younger than Gen X are really saying, no, that's actually not the story that we're going to tell anymore. We don't believe that story. We have insight into how powerful and wise our bodies are. So we're reclaiming that for ourselves, the older generations. But not only that, we are going to give our daughters and our children the gift of knowing that that story isn't true. So we're going to give them this beginning of their journey with the understanding that their bodies are powerful and cyclical and wise and connected to the seasons and connected to the lunar cycle, and allow them to embrace the magic of this from the very beginning. So they don't have to go through the unlearning process that we had to go through. And I think this is very threatening to patriarchal culture. As you can see, as women have expanded in their knowledge, have expanded in their expectations of rights, you can see our culture is just trying to clamp down even harder. And that is specifically because patriarchal culture does not want women to be educated and powerful, particularly about their bodies. So I think, when we're looking at the bigger picture, educating our children, standing in power ourselves is incredibly threatening to patriarchal culture. And that's why we have to keep doing it.
I love that answer. And it strikes me that in essence, much of that is also, we talk about the witch wound is essentially like the witch wound in a different expression. Through the shame around our bodies, the shame around our beliefs, because the witch wound was kind of very similar in the way that it was created and the way that we hold it in our bodies. But essentially, we're talking about shame, aren't we? We're talking about shame stories that have been passed down, like the archetypal wounded stories that have been passed down around our bleed and our bodies. So, as we've kind of landed on shame, I'd love to know what you would say to secret witches who maybe do hold shame around, their bleed, their body, their womb. Is there anything that you want to speak to around that?
Gosh, it's so much to unpack, but I guess the fundamental message is that we are so surrounded by these messages of shame and taboo, and we internalize them from a very young age, because it's not as though we're just literally hearing someone speak these words. These messages are encoded everywhere in our culture, in society. They're encoded in music, and they're encoded in TV shows and movies and magazines. So when we're presented with this onslaught, essentially, of messaging, of stories that depict shame and taboo and embarrassment, that's just what we internalize, because that is how our brains are programmed to learn, by noticing what is happening in the culture around us, what's acceptable and unacceptable. And then we just naturally kind of adhere to those expectations without really questioning them. So, looking at our own shame, looking at our own disconnect from our cycle, disconnect from our bodies, is a very natural consequence of the culture that we live in. So, I first of all want to say that just bringing yourself to a place of awareness around this is a huge step. Just recognizing, like, oh, this is how I feel because this is what I was shown. This is what I was taught to feel. This was the expectation in literally every domain of our society. So
Yeah.
we can release any feeling responsibility, first of all, about those feelings, and recognize and give ourselves grace that even just opening to the awareness that this was really cultural programming is a big first step.
Mm. That's so healing, because there's so many. I know it's the secret witch's tendency is always to kind of self-blame and critique and start to, like, we get our BT stick up and be like, no, how did you do this? How did you let this happen? And what we've got to kind of remember is that this is something that's happened unconsciously. And also that as we start to, and I think lovingly notice, like, I love what you said about that, like, have some compassion for ourselves. As we start to do that, like, it takes courage as well.
It does. And it takes, yeah, courage is an important part of it too, because oftentimes what it takes is a reckoning, I guess I will say, with our relationships with our mothers and caregivers, because a lot of times in women of my age, so I'm 52, so women around my age, women who are raising daughters who are, tweens and teens, what we have to reckon with is the story of how our mother taught us about our bodies,
Mm.
about puberty, about menstruation, about fertility, pregnancy, and birth. And oftentimes, what I hear from the women that I work with is there was so much shame and taboo encoded in that relationship. So, in my mother daughter circles, when I started doing this, it was very, focused on the experience for the girls. What I didn't realize was that I was opening this door and creating a container for women to do this healing of shame
Mm.
and taboo and embarrassment and disconnect, that was passed down by their mothers, obviously very unknowingly. Their mothers were acting in a way that is consistent with what the expectations are for our culture. But in doing so, they passed on that shame to their daughters without their daughters even having any context for understanding. So, for example, one mom, well, I should say one mom, but pretty much a million moms have shared with
Mm.
me um, that when they started bleeding, their mom would hand them a box of pads or tampons and say, "Here you go, figure it out." And one mom in particular, I remember, said, "I felt like I had done something wrong and I didn't know what it was. Nobody was talking about this, nobody explained it to her." So, I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of women, and really the prevailing story is I got no education. No one was holding my hand. No one was explaining anything to me. I knew based on how people were acting in my family that this wasn't okay to talk about, but I didn't know why. So as those girls grew into women and are now this age, they're recognizing the impact of patriarchal conditioning upon their parents and their grandmothers and their great grandmothers. But what they're saying is, now that I understand it, I'm choosing to not allow that to continue with me or with my family. So, as we're doing the work ourselves of healing ourselves, I think it's incredibly important to spend some time in meditation, going back and connecting with our younger selves who at that age needed something, and then allowing our spirit and our heart and our magic to reach backward in time to give our younger selves what it was that we needed then, that we didn't get from our moms, we didn't get from our families, we didn't get from our culture. That is a big part of the healing. And so a lot of
Mm.
moms in my group are experiencing deep healing by they're remothering themselves as they're mothering their daughters through this.
I think it's so vital, and I love that you shared that, because it's such a, again, like the work that I do as well, it's all about kind of meeting that inner little girl who didn't
Yes.
get what she needed. And again,
Yes.
through nobody's fault. It's just the way that our society's been set up. But it's so healing to go in and meet that tender little girl who
It is.
just like didn't get what
Yes.
she needed to move through what really is quite a huge initiation.
It is.
And it's a huge part of the reclamation of the witch as well, as I see it. Like the maiden mother crone cycle kind of gives that, you see those are kind of the blood mystery initiations.
Exactly. Right.
And so it feels, yeah, absolutely vital that we bring love and compassion to that little girl. So yeah, I love that. You mentioned earlier about the vitality really of like women gathering in these red tent spaces and just gathering in general. But I'm
In general, yeah.
wondering if you can speak to the red tent and the value of that compared to general circles and gatherings, like
Okay. I really feel like having done work in a literal red tent for many years and having done circles and gatherings and healing ceremonies all over the place, outside in yoga studios and people's homes in my backyard. Um, what I feel like is I guess I should say what I've learned over time is that the space and what we call the gathering is not as important as the gathering and the intention and the way that that space is held. So I created a a freestanding red tent essentially in a space that was really beautiful. It was dedicated only to that. So we only had women's gatherings there, mother-daughter gatherings there. And that space was amazing. It was truly magical. It was incredibly healing. And then the building got sold, so we had to leave, and I remember really deeply grieving that space and fearing that the magic would not travel with us to wherever we went next. And I had some really beautiful reflections from women who had been in circle with me for a really long time that said, "We are Red Tent. It isn't this space. It's us, it's you, it's the intention, it's the way that we do circle." And so it took me having that experience to realize, oh, that's absolutely true. So I don't have a dedicated red tent space now, just because of, circumstances, but I do still have gatherings regularly. And it truly is not crucial whether we call it a red tent space. It's not crucial if there's red everywhere. What is most important is the understanding of why we're coming together and how this gathering is different than a social gathering. So, I lead circle in a very specific way every time. And because I hold circle in that way, I believe it really facilitates healing. It facilitates connection. It facilitates these spiritual breakthroughs that are life changing for women. So whether I do that in a red tent, or whether I do that out around a fire pit at the lake, is less important.
Love that. What I'm hearing in that is the red tents within, almost like
It is within. That is right.
The body's our temple.
The body is a temple. That is exactly right. And so bringing that awareness and that reverence and magic and love to the gathering is what makes it so special and so healing.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess you're exploring the wisdom of the womb, or in that as well, which I guess is kind of the initiation part, like the
Right.
exploration of the initiations as well.
Right. So some of the work that I do is very focused on womb wisdom, exactly. And so something that was very life changing for me was learning how our cycle aligns with the four seasons. So within every 28, 29-day cycle, we have metaphorical four seasons that align with the four phases of our cycle. And when I learned that, it was so profound. It was so life-changing for me. And I had that moment of like, how did we not know this? I know that this wisdom was out in the world long before we came, and it got lost, it got buried. So that when I talk with women about cycle literacy, body sovereignty, that is the core story. So teaching women to understand and connect with their cycles in relation to the 4 seasons of the year is the foundation of everything that I do that relates to talking about our cycles, talking about our womb wisdom. And truly, I have seen so many times that even grown women who are my age or, in their 40s and their 30s, how that knowledge changes their relationships with themselves.
Mm.
It is amazing. It is so amazing. And we do have that sense of like, oh, if I had known this, there's so many ways that I could have made better decisions or I could have cared for myself better. But the most important one is this message from our culture that there's something wrong with us because
Mm.
we feel tired or we feel irritable for a few days every month. And that has been the language around that is that it's a syndrome, right? That there's something wrong with us. There's
Yeah.
something not functional about us. But our bodies are not meant to be the same every single day. And we're not supposed to have the same level of energy or the same level of creativity or connectivity. And so, what I share in my circles with girls and women is our energy isn't the same throughout the year. If we look at how we feel during each of the 4 seasons, we can identify that we feel differently. We have different energy or different cravings. We
Mm.
act differently in the world. We want to wear different things. And then we also talk a lot about how we already have cycles that we're very familiar with in our body.
Yeah.
We understand the cycle of sleep. We understand the cycle of hunger. We recognize the signals that our bodies send to us to let us know it's time to sleep or it's time to eat. And we don't question those signals, right? We've been shown throughout our life that when you are irritable and your stomach is growling and you're lightheaded, and maybe you're hangry, that means you're hungry and it's time to feed your body. So feed
Mm.
your body, right? So these
Mm.
are the messages we get over and over. Or if we're yawning and we don't have any energy and we want to lay down and maybe also we're irritable, that means we're tired and we need to go to sleep. So we're giving
Mm.
this permission and it's modeled for us over and over that these signals have meaning and that when we act on these signals, we feel better. So when I ask girls, well, what happens if we don't listen to those signals? What if we ignore them? If we get all these signals that our body's telling us we're hungry and we ignore them, what happens? And they know that what happens is we feel worse, we get more irritable, all of these physical experiences we have just escalate, they don't go away. So it then becomes really easy for them to understand that in our cycle, we also have these phases where our
Mm.
body is giving us signals. It's time to slow down. It's time to distance ourselves. We need rest. We need to go inward. We need quiet. But what our culture is telling us is that
Mm.
those signals are us, that there's something wrong with us, that they're a
Yeah.
sign that there's something dysfunctional in us.
Mm.
So if I
Yeah.
could do one thing, it would just be
Yeah.
to teach girls and women like our
Mm.
bodies are wise and those signals are there for a reason.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And it's for having me reminisce on my own journey with that. And similar to you, I had a journey with, I think probably it was reading Wild Power was my first, first kind of awakening to that. But yeah, it's just so, in fact, it's so innately kind of woven into my life now to meet those different phases. And I think also
Mhm.
the way that I started to understand it was that there's the kind of, like we were talking about, the maiden, lover, mother, crone, like those are kind of the seasons in many ways. So I think the more that I
Right.
got in touch with that, but it is quite astounding still to see how we pathologize, as you're saying, the natural body, the natural rhythms of our
Yeah.
body, which is, yeah, mind blowing, isn't it? Really.
It really is because when you look at the world around us, everything is in cycles. Everything is in cycles. So for us to really have that amputated from the beginning of our lives, the beginning of our journey in this body, it is very damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And disconnects us from our inner wisdom as well, which
Yes.
it is such a big wound of the witch who's learned to shame that and shove that down.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that illumination. Um, I wanted to go into this piece around the mother wounded because you've started to speak to it already, and I think it's so vital to kind of see this piece around like it being almost like passed down again
Mhm.
innocently, unconsciously. And I suspect your work being to help women liberate that, and so that they can, help their daughters and their children navigate that. So I'm wondering if you can talk a bit to your book, Period of Change, and
Oh, yeah.
what inspired that. And I
Mhm.
suppose you've already shared a little bit about that, but how can we begin to welcome our daughters and our next generations into menstruation as an initiation? Because it's almost like
Mhm.
I see it as almost like a choice point into adulthood, and I think that's so vital. So yeah, I'd love to hear more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book Period of Change, Welcoming Your Daughter's Period with Care and Confidence is going to be out in March of 2026. So just a few months. And it is really actually the culmination of, millions of conversations that I've had with mothers over the years. So the way it started was a lot of women would text me and say, "Oh, my sister's daughter started her period and she wants to know what to do." Or, my daughter's going to start her period soon. So I want to plan something and I have no idea what to do. It really emerged and was born from the questions that so many mothers had about how to guide their daughters through puberty and menarche in a way that was different than what we all experienced.
Mm,
So I wrote the book to mothers. It's for mothers who are on this journey at some point, between and teen years, getting ready or having already welcomed their daughters into menarche and menstruation, giving them all of the information, all of the language, all of the affirmations to give them the experience that we didn't have. So it's really for moms who know I know what I don't want, not sure how to get to what I do want.
mm,
So as I wrote the book, it really started out as it was just going to be like a downloadable PDF of like how to plan a red party or how to plan a celebration for your daughter when she begins her period. And then as I continued to write it, I was like, oh, they need to know about this too. Oh, we need to talk about this too. They need language for this too. So it ended up being like 33 chapters.
I know.
But
It's
it's
so clever.
covering so many facets of this journey from, what language are we using? We are using correct anatomical language for all the parts of our body. We're teaching our girls that all of the names for their body parts, including the fact that we have a clitoris, and the only function of the clitoris is pleasure. We're beginning these conversations that our body is literally made for pleasure from the very beginning, because that is
Mhm,
so intrinsically tied to our experiences, but it's also tied to our sense of sovereignty and to consent. So we're talking about, the function of our body parts, the names of our body parts. And then I guide them through here's kind of a breakdown of what actually is a period. Here's what the menstrual cycle really is. And I connect that to the 4 seasons. So if moms don't have that information, they can learn it then themselves. I talk about navigating your period at school, how to prepare for that, how to discuss it socially and care for yourself. I talk about menstruation and sports. I have a chapter on LGBTQ kids and menstruation, neurodiverse kids and menstruation, nutrition, how we support our bodies with nutrition. There's so much in there because I really
amazing.
want moms to feel equipped, so equipped.
Mm,
And as I kind of imagined the book, I was thinking of it as this, textbook almost of all of this information. But the feedback that I got from moms was, we need something we can literally pick up from our bedside, read it in 5 minutes, and have the information you need. So I almost imagine it's kind of like a field guide. So it has
mm,
the information you need. It's right there, easy to read, bullet points, paragraphs. But then it also has something really different that I haven't seen in any other books that are oriented towards moms. So, first of all, it has a section of reflection and journaling prompts. So, this is where the healing invitation really comes in. We're looking at how were we conditioned? What was our experience? What do we wish could have been different for us? And then I also offer conversation starters. So, yes, we know we want to talk about pleasure. How are we going to do that? So I offer a lot of conversation starters, exact language, or I say, use this as a guideline and adapt it to your family. And then I also offer affirmations. Each chapter has a section of affirmations for moms because we need it, right? We need to know like we are going to be able to do this. We are capable. We are the mother that our child needs. We are able to do this. And then the end of the book, I share a little bit about the history of menstruation, like I shared with you earlier. And I also share a period positive guide for families. So that's probably the other biggest question is, how do I get my husband, my partner on board with this? How do I bring this wisdom into my relationship with my sons? So there is a full chapter on how to integrate this as a family.
I love that. I love that there's so many mums wanting that as well. That feels so nourishing to know. Like there's so many of us who are actually longing for this wisdom, like the ancient wisdom that would once have
Yes.
been passed down and that has been kind of missed. And speaking of it being missed, actually, I imagine, much like you said, in your own journey, like about feeling anger, rage, and even I suppose grief,
Oh,
like
yeah,
we
absolutely.
haven't had this. Like, I'm wondering if you can speak to that because I suspect as people are listening, like there's not only the guilt and shame about their own experiences, but also maybe they're starting to maybe listeners are thinking, oh well, I have not been able to bring this to my child. Like if there's stuff coming up like that and there is that anger, that rage, that grief of the missed wisdom or the lost ancient wisdom, what would you say to them?
Oh yeah, that's so deep. Because there's such a sense of like injustice in that it's not fair. It's not fair that this is where we are in the 21st century and it's like we're just learning this about ourselves. And I think that the grief and the loss and the rage, those are all completely valid feelings that we can recognize and honor in ourselves. And we can give ourselves space to feel all of those feelings while also recognizing we have the power internally to change that story for ourselves and that we have the power to change that story for the girls and menstruators in our lives. But it takes a lot. It takes moving through the discomfort that we have internalized so deeply around our bodies, around menstruation, around language. So when I imagine, moms on this journey, what I imagine is like, take a deep breath and take that big step forward into the unknown, because that is really what it takes. Our kids are looking to us to set the tone for how we're going to discuss this and how this will be thought of and cared for in our family. So sometimes we kind of have to fake it till we make it and have the conversations, do the, modeling of self-care, modeling of cycle tracking, even if inside we're trembling a little bit because it's so unknown and it's so uncomfortable. But that is the journey of healing, is really
Right.
saying, I'm going to do this for myself because this is what I deserve and this is what I want and this is what I need. And also, as we are reclaiming this and as we're modeling this is how we're giving permission to other women and to girls in our culture. And I really believe when people say, "Oh, I'm going to smash the patriarchy," I don't ever really say that, because what I believe is we have to dismantle patriarchy, and it really happens one person, one family at a time. These conversations, these healing journeys are what shift that, so that we are creating the cultural change that we want to see.
There's a couple of things that come up in response to that. One is that there's kind of like a beauty in like I guess talking about the patriarchy, like with the patriarchy has taught us that we have to get it right, that we have to know the right way to do things. And so
Oh yeah.
even just being in the messy kind of not knowing how to kind of model that and not knowing how to meet our children, like there's a beauty in almost like meeting them there and being like, you know what, I actually don't know, but let's figure it
Mhm.
out together. Like
Mhm.
there's something about like being in the messiness and not having to be the right, like get it right. That is also quite freeing. So that was number one. I don't know
Yes.
if there's anything around that that you want to share, but there's also another point. Maybe I'll
Yeah, well,
pause.
just in the book, one of the affirmations or conversations that kind of comes up chapter after chapter is, I love that you are curious about this. Let's find out together. Or
Mm,
here's what I have learned about it. Can we talk about how you're feeling about it? So there's a
mm,
lot of space for moms not to have expertise on this. And I think that's
yeah.
okay. And I think it's real.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. That's something I know I've learned being a parent to a 5-year-old. Like, you know what? I actually don't. I don't
No.
when they're
Good
big,
question. Let's
yeah,
get that out together.
yeah. The other thing that came up was that these kind of moments in our lives are what you call a rite of passage or an initiation, as I would call them. And I think one of the misconceptions about initiations, especially in like the quick fix world, where we're like, oh, initiation, let's jump into that, and that sounds fun. It's like
Yeah,
it's not always fun. It's usually dark and messy.
yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And it's scary. It can be hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, gorgeous. One of the phrases that you spoke to that I loved was you mentioned about being a menstrual midwife and helping others be menstrual midwives in terms of like for themselves and also for
Mhm,
others. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little
mhm.
bit because it was such a
Yeah.
really juicy phrase.
Yes,
Like,
yes, and I'm happy to talk about it.
what's the menstrual midwife archetype mean to you?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so yeah, let's dive into that because um, I guess over the many, many years that I have done circle work and work with mothers and daughters, I have not found language to describe what it is that I do. There's like no title, there's no training, it's just this is what I'm doing with women and girls is like reclaiming this deep wisdom that is our birthright. And so over the years, I have done certifications. I am a national board certified integrative women's health coach, but that's not what I'm doing, right? That isn't what I'm
Mm,
doing.
yeah.
So I have two really amazing friends that are midwives, birth midwives, and they both have done this journey of mother and daughter circle with me. And I think it was then that I actually said, "You are a menstrual midwife." And this was many years ago. And I was like, "Oh, yes, that is what I am." I'm beside these women. I'm giving them education. I'm giving them support. I'm giving them a container. I'm holding their hand through this journey, but I'm not on the journey with them. It's their journey. And I'm seeing them rebirth themselves spiritually,
Mhm.
psychologically, as they learn about this amazing part of themselves. So for many years, I kind of just like, I left that in the percolator. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to use that because there is a very specific connotation to the word midwife. And
Mm.
it is a word that's very highly respected. And so I did not want to step into using that term without giving it some deep thought and consideration. And I
Oh,
also don't
yeah.
want to step on the toes of women who are trained birth midwives. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what I am trying to do is create space and language for this reclamation that is so much more coming to the surface more and more for women and women that are raising girls and kids who are going to menstruate. And when I looked at the language that is out there, it just was like, no, that isn't what I'm doing.
Mhm.
So menstrual midwife came back to the forefront and I decided to that is the appropriate terminology for what I'm doing. So, I'm holding this threshold. I
Mm.
think that's one of the biggest pieces.
Mm. Yes.
Holding this threshold for a transformation. An initiation is leaving something behind. Part of ourself dies as we step into this new unknown and the new archetype that we will become. So that did feel like appropriate language. And the archetype of the menstrual midwife, then I think is very similar to a birth midwife in that we have the reverence for that stepping across the
Mm.
threshold. We're holding that container. We're providing information, empowering women to make choices. We're not making the choices for them, though. We are there to walk along with them on their journey and to provide that support as they step into this next phase of whatever phase of life they are going to be in. So
Mhm.
it's not just for me, it's not just the initiation of menarche and the rite of passage of menarche, it's the initiation rite of passage of motherhood and the initiation rite of passage of menopause. These are all part of the same continuum of recognizing and honoring that our body is cyclical and that we do go through these changes and phases, and that recognizing them, it gives us power and it gives us agency.
Mm.
So claiming the term menstrual midwife, and I hope other women use it too, because we need that. We need this
Mm.
language around this work that is being done right now. Um, because there isn't anything else that really fits
Mm.
exactly what we're doing. So I had talked to someone else very recently who also uses the term menstrual midwife for herself. We had never talked before. So we had a really great conversation about that. And
Mm.
so I do want to plant that seed. If this is work that you feel called to, it is just as powerful a calling as being a birth worker, as being a birth midwife, or even, a death doula, a death midwife. These these caring roles, these healing roles that we had
Mm.
are so important for our human journey. And I think there's just a lot of interest and passion around this right now because this is coming up for healing. So I encourage women to really embrace that calling. And whether you get trained in a traditional way or whether you are apprenticing with a healer in this capacity, it's really important that we all step into this healing work if we are called to do it.
Mm. Yeah, that's really gorgeous. And what occurs to me as you're sharing that as well is almost like you're midwifing women to be their own menstrual midwives in many ways.
Yeah, that's what I would love is that
Yeah.
I want every woman, I want every girl to be the full embodiment of, midwife, priestess, expert goddess that you can embody because that's what we deserve.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, and it's so fun. I love that somebody reflected that that was what your medicine was like. And I'm like, for sure, you're a menstrual midwife. And that
Right. Right.
and one of my clients was like, "You're a witch midwife." I was like, "Oh yeah,
You
that's it."
are. That's right.
It's like, "Oh, yeah, that's cool."
Yeah.
So I know I claimed that one as well.
Well, and what were witches? Witches were midwives, they were the ones
Mm,
that were holding the thresholds. They were the ones with the body wisdom and the wisdom of the earth, bringing that healing to women. So it all weaves together.
yeah, it does. Yeah. Gorgeous. I am wondering, in terms of like, if somebody's listening who's just beginning this journey, like, where's the best place for them to start? Like, is there something that's like a simple practice? I don't know whether there's something around that cycle awareness or, whatever it
Mhm.
is, like what comes to mind? Is this something practical for people to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, where I would love for people to start is simply becoming aware of how they are feeling throughout their cycle. So, cycle tracking is one of the most profound acts of self-care that we can integrate into our daily lives so that we can begin to understand our own patterns. And over time, what we generally recognize is, oh, in, the bleeding week of our cycle, we're feeling tired, we want to hibernate, we want to be kind of disconnected from others. And then in that second week, as we begin to prepare for ovulation, we're feeling more alive, we're feeling more social, we might be feeling more creative. We're kind of coming back to life, just like we do in literal spring. And then summer is kind of like the peak of ovulation when our bodies are literally wanting to be with other people. We crave physical touch, we crave intimacy. And actually, it's so interesting. Studies have shown that during ovulation, women perceive themselves as more beautiful and others perceive them during that time as more beautiful and attractive or,
Mm.
um, engaging. So biologically, we literally do have these shifts that we feel emotionally or we feel physically. And then in fall, as ovulation has passed, we're starting to slow down again. We're starting to look inward, see what we need to release, and prepare for this period of rest and hibernation. So I really encourage women to empower themselves by tracking their cycles and looking for those patterns, because what we can do then is make better choices for ourselves. We can completely embrace the cyclical nature of our emotional experience, our physical experience.
Mm.
And in this way, we don't let society discount our experiences. If we can fully claim that
Mm.
ourselves, reject the idea that, this is pathologized, that there's some kind of syndrome that we have. And side note, I don't want to, diminish anyone's true experience of having syndromes related to menstruation, but
Mm.
the typical normal cyclical experience of menstruation is not a syndrome, and us feeling irritable and tired is not dysfunctional. So I think, you know, just beginning there with connecting with your cycle in a curious and compassionate way is truly the most powerful way that we can begin this journey with
Mm,
ourselves.
I agree. No, I love that. And one of the things that comes up though, as I hear that, because I know our secret witches, and I know the women in my apothecary as well, particularly as well, often say this. Like, I really want to do that. I really want to enter that practice, and I'm so busy, and it feels selfish to carve out that time to do that. Like, so I'm wondering if you would speak to that, because from my perspective, and particularly around what you've shared, like us being in that work is actually not just healing for us, but for the world. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Like,
On claim,
massively.
when you say claiming, do you mean like claiming the full nature of our cyclical experience? Is that
I
what you
think
mean?
just even entering practices to be in body awareness practices, like carving out that
Mhm,
time for them to just,
mhm,
I mean, I know you could just do it in like 10 minutes even.
mhm.
But for some women who are kind of busy secret witches, that even feels quite a challenge at times when we're
Yeah,
juggling everything.
that's very true. And when we're not used to incorporating that, it can feel like, okay, well, this is a whole extra thing that I have to do. The great
Mm,
thing is there's so many ways to do it. So for me, I used to use an app. I don't use apps anymore because, you know, we're living in this era of complete surveillance. Um, and I don't discourage women from using apps if that helps them, because they are very helpful tools.
mm.
Absolutely. Just be careful of privacy policies and data collection policies. But so I have gone back to literally just writing the day of my cycle on the top of my, I would say, you know, paper schedule
Mm.
book. I don't use a Google schedule or anything like that. So
Yeah.
on top, you know, at the top of each page, there's a little
This is
space for
right.
the day. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It's cute, and
Um,
it's got little poems in, and
oh my
it's
gosh.
amazing.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you can just write it on your, you know, calendar. You can keep notes in your notes app on your phone. If you can just give yourself 2 minutes of space, either at the beginning of your day or the end of your day, to just pause and notice. That's really all that you need to get started, even
Mm.
if it is something very informal, like I'm just going to jot this down in my notebook or make a little note here or write it on my calendar on the wall or my whiteboard. There's no wrong way to do it. Really,
Mm.
it is make it as easy and practical as it needs to be for your life, but
Gorgeous.
just so that you have that connection to your changing experience. That's really the most powerful thing that we can do.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean you have to, you know, make a big commitment to it or anything. Do what you can. If you skip 4 days, that's okay too. You know, just come back to it
Mm.
when you can.
Yeah.
I also really love the idea of using a round chart for cycling so that each day is
Mm.
like a pie slice. And I like visualizing it this way because we are not squares, we're not rectangles, we're not pages, we are cycles. And so seeing your cycle as kind of like a pie chart and then
I
having a
love
space
that.
for each day is a really, really beautiful way to connect with the fact that we are cyclical.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, I love that. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, yeah, I was going to speak to. Yeah, I love what you said there around, like, it doesn't have to be this big thing. Because I think that'll be so freeing for so many women, and I think also it's helpful to just illuminate, like what you said earlier. Again, like, it's not selfish. It's like the least selfish thing we could do, because
Right.
it's having, if we can understand our bodies better and be more in harmony with our rhythms, like, and not be kind of in, beating ourselves up for and pathologizing ourselves,
Mhm,
we're going to feel less overwhelmed. Like, there's just going to be
mhm,
so many benefits to those around us as well, but also for ourselves, which will ripple out. So
mhm.
yeah, I just wanted to name that. I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that, but
Yeah, well, I just to, you know, to expand on that just a little bit, we would not make a plan to take a road trip if we knew we were going to be on the road for 11 hours and we didn't have access to food. We wouldn't take that trip without packing food for ourselves, right? We wouldn't take that trip without
mm,
packing water for ourselves. Similarly, you know, we look in the weather report so that we know approximately how we want to dress for that day. We wouldn't walk outside in, you know, January in shorts and a tank top, because that really wouldn't serve us. It wouldn't serve our well-being. Bringing this sense of cyclical awareness into our everyday life is akin to those things. We can make better
Yeah.
decisions for ourselves. We can predict things more accurately. So I mean, the word selfish to me is just completely not applicable to this
Yeah.
situation
I
any more than it would be like selfish to
agree.
know I need to eat lunch at noon, you know? Like
Mm.
that's just part of living in a
That's
body.
brilliant. Yeah, exactly. It's just our needs. It's just us.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm. I love that so much. And that feels like a good place to come to a close. But I wonder if you have any kind of last wisdom that you want to share, if there's anything that feels unsaid. You're welcome to share that now.
Oh, yeah. I guess what? So I don't think that secret witches are really afraid to embrace these parts of themselves, but
Mm.
we may not know where the doorway is to enter.
Yes.
So
Love that.
I believe that the most powerful thing you can do is, if this wisdom is calling to you, find the door to walk through. And you can find that through me, you can find it through other women. But my website is periodofchange.com. So not only do I have events and resources for girls and mothers, obviously, I have a whole entire page that took me literally days to curate, called favorites. So it's periodofchange.com
Mm.
slash favorites. And it's like all of my favorite things, all of my favorite books, all of my favorite menstrual care products. So if you want
Ooh,
a
amazing.
little, I guess, rabbit hole to jump down, that is a great place to start.
Amazing. I love that. And my last question was going to be, where can people find you? So,
Right.
I mean, there might be other places you want them to find you as well, if you want to share any others, but that's great.
Well, I'm just not really a social media. I just don't spend a lot of time on social media, and that will
Mm.
probably change as the book gets closer to release, because we just have to be out there to do these things. But I do have Instagram. I'm Amy Wilding Official, and I also have Period of Change on Instagram. So you can find me in those places, or periodofchange.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. And
Yes. Yes.
yeah, I think it's going to be magical for everyone listening. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation. I love talking with you. This was great.
I adored this particular episode with Amy. Here are my takeaways. Menstruation was once seen as sacred. The original root of the word ritual literally comes from our sacred bleed. Shame about menstruation is inherited. It is passed down when mothers don't question the stories they were told by the patriarchy. The most radical thing we can do is re-educate ourselves about our bodies and then give that truth to our next generations, our daughters and children. Our bodies are not dysfunctional. We're just living in a culture that doesn't understand cycles. Our cycles are not symptoms to fix, they are rhythms to remember, and they are natural. If we didn't receive the initiation into our first bleed that we needed, we can still offer it to ourselves. It's never too late. We can go back and offer our inner little girl a sense of safety. The menstrual midwife within each of us is the one who holds the threshold of transformation with reverence, not fear. And we don't need to get it right. Our daughters and children don't need perfect mothers. They need honest ones.